can you, Professor Korten, can you tell us a bit about your professional background and how did you end up producing English language content on Instagram?
Well, I have a very serpentine sort of educational background. That is to say, I began as a classical musician a long time ago. And then I transitioned to business. I was in business for a period of time. And then I hit on education and history and writing and English, which has been my focus the last 20 or so years. And so that's sort of the educational background. And I did that in America. I'm American, but I also studied in England at Oxford and Cambridge and finished my PhD there, and then lived in Europe. But the Instagram and the YouTube English language video content sort of developed when I came to Russia. It's a very big, YouTube and Instagram are very popular here, and
Yes.
I just was exposed to a lot of people who were doing it. I thought that maybe I had a message that wasn't out there that perhaps I could articulate and perhaps bring benefit to some, mainly at the time, initially teachers and advanced and upper intermediate students. And that slowly evolved to where we're at today. All the while, I'm still, of course, occupying 2 professorships at 2 universities in 2 different countries. So that's quite interesting.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Okay. Okay, Professor. So how long have you been doing this Instagram and YouTube channel?
YouTube's very recent, and I haven't actually produced proper YouTube videos yet. I'm just moving my Instagram IGTV videos over, so I'll do that shortly. That's been a few months. Instagram began a year and 4 months ago, I suppose. Maybe a year and 6 months ago. And
I see.
Yeah.
It's quite wonderful, and you have as far as I know, a huge followers on the Instagram.
Well,
if
it's
I'm not
very
wrong.
Unexpected. I have to say, I wasn't expecting such positive reception to the content. And if you look at my early videos, you'll know why. They weren't very interesting or particularly well done, and that's not my editor's fault, it's my fault. I just wasn't very good in front of a camera. I'm still not amazing, but it's, learning along the way, you improve a bit.
I see. You are, as far as I know from your videos, you are generally creating videos for pronunciation, I think. Am I right?
No, it's well, pronunciation is on Saturdays. Every Wednesday I go live to talk about aspects of writing or grammar or language or teaching. And then the short videos are varied. Recently, there's been a lot of interest in language exchanges between individuals or group chats or foreign languages, or we're introducing group chats for teachers to get their students involved. That's sort of the big thing I'm interested in at the moment. But all of my Instagram videos, I try to produce with the caveat that you can't easily Google the content. Because I want to produce something that's interesting and novel. And if you can easily Google it, then there's really no point me producing it in a video, I don't think, unless I have a very special knack of presenting it, which I don't think I do. So I'm trying to just win on the content. And so I try to produce things that are original in terms of content, which perhaps interests people.
I see. But the contents are really, really very interesting, and I think the content that you are creating is, it's that kind of a lack of in this area. The people are looking for that kind of thing, so that's why it became really quickly, the popular. And you have lots of followers about that. It's wonderful.
Thank you. I
Wonderful.
appreciate it.
Okay, Professor. So my next question is about philosophy of teaching, Professor. So what is your philosophy of teaching?
That's a good question. 1 second here. I'm going to have to.
No, it's okay.
So, all right. So I teach at university mainly. I've taught all ages, but I teach at university. This semester in Poland, I have a doctoral class. It's the doctoral school. I'll be teaching PhD students.
Wow.
I've taught, professors. I gave a lecture to university teachers in Uzbekistan last week. And so I have a sort of a different approach because of the level of student that I'm teaching. And that is that I emphasize not only the language, but the content. In other words, it's not just how you say it, it's what you say. And so I analyze and I scrutinize the content, whether it's how logical it is, how much analysis is used, how important the information is. And then, of course, address the language issues, style, grammar, syntax, etc. But for me, it's a combination of the two. If you don't have something interesting to say, the perfect grammar isn't really going to help you. And so I feel it's my obligation as an educator not only to educate the language, but to refine the mind and the thinking. I feel that is one of my great objectives. There's a second great objective that I feel as a professor I have, and that is to link very clearly the skill that I'm teaching in the language with the skill that they will need in their future career. So I'll give you one example to make my point. So if I'm discussing summaries, and I'm asking them to summarize either a short passage or a video or an event, because I do all three, an event that is taking place in front of their eyes, obviously on video, I will ask them to summarize that. And of course, they can summarize it in a variety of ways. It's not important to have a discussion on that. But what's interesting is that I tell them that your ability to accurately assess the event in front of your eyes is a skill you will need as a manager or a director or a boss, because there's going to be issues. There are going to be problems and issues within an organization. If you don't get it right, you lose the respect of those in the organization. It's important to understand what happened and then prioritize the most important events, followed by the lesser events. This is a skill that's critical. And so I try to underscore life application of writing skills. So I'm teaching academic writing at MGIMO, and today we had class. And so, making those connections enlivens the discussion. Students wake up a little bit and they understand that, wow, this is real. And I think it's effective. But beyond being effective, I think it's one of our obligations. It's not just to teach in sort of a cocoon, insulated from the outside world. We need to make direct applications to how this can tangibly benefit them in their career. And I think it's been pretty successful to date.
I see. I see. Thank you very much, Professor. It's very, very interesting and very useful, philosophy of your teachings. Great to hear this one. And if you, there is I think I don't want to miss the questions, but there's a question. Is it okay to check it?
Yeah,
there is a question from Kate Pronikeva. I think, how do you manage to squeeze Instagram into a busy life of professor? It's so time consuming, she says like this.
Very difficult. So this is one of the issues I have, especially because I'm not only teaching, I'm an active writer, and I've just received, I have to say, great news. I'm been asked by Cambridge History. They do Cambridge histories of events, and I've been asked to contribute on the newest Cambridge history of, as it happens, the popes, because I'm a 19th century specialist. So these sorts of things, writing is one of my highest callings as a professor. Teaching is also a high calling. So I prioritize those simply by, I start writing early in the day. and I push everything else out. So I give myself 3 hours, you know, during the best time of the day if I'm not teaching, and then everything else has to wait. But it takes discipline to do this, because there are always things you can be doing, especially with Instagram. I'm receiving hundreds of questions, you know, a day, perhaps. It's really busy, but I think you need to discipline yourself. But it's not just me, it's anyone who's, you know, anyone who's busy in their career has to prioritize what's most important long term. And for me, it's writing, because ultimately my best teaching ideas issue from my writing, my thinking, my analysis, this quiet time. Then I try them out in the classroom, and then I produce them on Instagram. And so Instagram is sort of the third iteration, and then YouTube will be the fourth in the fullness of time. But I get sort of several tries or attempts at it before it goes live on the record, you know, permanent record, as it were. And so this is a really important step, not just professionally, but just to be a better educator. So you talked about, I'm not sure if you asked about how you prepare, or, you know, your educational sort of background, but this on-the-job education is super helpful. So writing, followed by teaching, followed by publishing, and then YouTube is an extended version of that publishing. You get you crystallize in your mind what you really believe. And this has been really helpful. It's been another form of education for me. I've really enjoyed it. But just to summarize one more time, the initial question, prioritizing what's important is essential, or you'll be busy and you won't be effective.
Yes, totally agree with you, Professor Korten. So thanks you very much for the answer. And there is another question, but I will ask that question later. And I would like to ask you a very important question, especially about, you know, this COVID-19 period, Professor. So how do you engage students in your classes, especially in this transitional period?
Well, so I'm at two universities. One is offline and one is online. And I've received feedback on both, and they've both been similar. So this is an interesting sort of event. So I will just explain, or try to just tell you what I think is important on the online sort of conditions, which obviously are new for all of us. I think being prepared and being on time are two basic but essential qualities if you want to keep students involved. If you're late, or if you're not prepared, students will tune out. They're just not gonna. They're not gonna be interested. It's a perfect excuse to shut off the camera and just start cooking or do whatever they do when the camera's off. So I think those are essential. And then obviously once you have the lesson underway, engaging them. And let me tell you how I engage them. What I ask them to do, I do right along with them. And I'm probably more excited, or the most excited person about what I'm asking them to do than anyone else in the sort of virtual room. In other words, if you're a student watching and you see your teacher excited and doing the work that I'm asking them to do, and I provide the answers that I come up with, and we share, so they know that I'm deeply involved, it's hard to tune out. You have to be really callous, I think, to sort of say, Art, I'm not interested. And, you know, so I'm able to sort of engage most students because I'm so engaged. And so when I ask them to do something in class, I'm doing it in class with them. And this, I think, is really critical. Engagement, excitement, clarity, obviously. And then, of course, what I mentioned earlier about tying in the skills that I'm teaching to real life, you know, circumstances. I just tell them like a father, listen, this skill is super important for your future, and here's why. And they listen. And this is interesting. So I think a combination of all of those, Some of these are easily under our control. Starting on time, being prepared. The other things, being engaged. I think obviously we can do that. The tying the skills into real life, I think, takes some practice. It took me a long time to evolve that. I wasn't great at it. I'm still not great, but I'm getting better at showing, real life application. And now I'm really big on that. But I think the combination of all of these engages students who are interested and students
Mm-hmm.
who were borderline interested. The students who,
Wow.
weren't interested at all in your subject, you're probably not going to convert them, but I can't worry about them.
Mm-hmm.
I do my best and I'm
Yeah,
friendly and I
one.
offer a lifeline, but if they don't grab it, I can't
Yeah,
save them,
wonderful.
Volkan.
Yeah. It's like a great one. Thank you very much, Professor Korten. It's wonderful, really. The ideas and the way your suggestions is great, really. Thank you very much. And someone asks us, can I ask a question? And of course, you can ask questions. Just write your questions into the chat part, and I will ask to Professor Korten when we have a suitable time. Okay. So, Professor Korten, my next question is about professional development. What are the main ways you pursue professional development?
That's a great question. I
Thank you.
think I want to start with the one aspect that I think everyone can do. So this is one that is not just reserved for me. It's what everyone can do, and that is to put yourself in new situations. Allow yourself to have new experiences. So I'll give you a basic example so you know what I'm talking about. If you're teaching speaking, um, challenge yourself and teach grammar or listening or reading or writing. It's a new experience that rounds out your education, gives you a different perspective
Mm-hmm.
on your topic. That's a basic example, but it's one most of the teachers listening can apply. So do you know what I do at university? I submit new courses almost every year. It's a lot of extra work for me, or every 2 years actually. It takes me 2 years to
Mm-hmm.
sort of get to come to grips on some of these
Yeah,
subjects. But I submit new courses because I want to challenge myself to always grow and always learn. And so this is one of the things I do is I teach different subjects. Number
I see.
two, it's
Mm-hmm.
actually related to experiences. I have the fortune of doing different things. So I'm a writer and I'm doing that every day. Writing is a wonderful tool, but how I sort of improve in that area is that publishers or journals provide
Mm-hmm.
feedback in the form of reviews. I get reviews, I get criticisms, and I get criticized as well on not only the content,
Very
but
good.
also the style and the writing. So this is really a great education because at the professor level, you have no one correcting you. So publishing is my way to stay a student where I'm
I
still
see.
getting input on my work. So I take publishing very seriously because it's one of the last forms of education that you can get.
Mm-hmm.
It's very helpful for me and I'm very lucky to do it. And I like the criticism because I want to know where the problems are. I have no problem. I know I'm not perfect and I want to improve. So it's fine for me. And I think, you know, submitting yourself to a barrage of criticism, a lot of criticism is actually very good for the ego. It keeps you very humble and you realize you're not as good as some people think you are. You're just a little bit further along the road, but
Yeah.
you're still a student. I still feel like a student. And so this is a nice position to be in, to grow and to learn. So um, so feedback on my writing, new experiences, and
Mm-hmm.
then new genres is the
I
third
see.
way I believe you can grow in the profession. And for me, that's been Instagram or these videos. When you go on a video and you have 60 seconds to make your point,
Mm-hmm. I
it
see. I
forces
see.
you to crystallize in your mind what you know. Either you know it or you don't know it. And this is very
I see.
interesting. And so that's been a real big help, because you know, if you can't say it in 60 seconds, you don't know it yet. And so this has been a great way to sort of, you know, crystallize or refine some of the concepts that I knew, but
Mm-hmm.
perhaps I needed to clarify.
I see. It's a great one, and it's really wonderful. Even you said you were a professor, and you say I like to be criticized. This is and it's really wonderful. As you know that some people they cannot they don't want to get criticized by others. So, but this is a very perfect the point. So it's really great to accept the critics from others, as you mentioned. It's wonderful. Thank you, Professor.
Mm.
So, if it is okay, I would like to ask the question that our audiences asked to you, and it is here. She asks Miss Kiss teacher, could you give some advice to teach vocabulary? There is a question like this.
Wow. Well, how old are the students, I suppose, would be my first, how old and what level? It would depend on the age and the level, I think.
Uh-huh.
And
So
access to resources. Three variables I think I would need to know before I can answer that question. So
I
age,
see.
level of English, and access to resources. If I know those
Mm-hmm.
three variables, I can give a better answer.
Okay.
If
So,
we don't have those, I can give a general answer that might apply or might not
yeah,
apply. So,
it's I think maybe she's going to write the age and the level of the students here. But if let's wait for her answer for your questions, Professor. Then we can go back. Huh? She says teenagers. Okay.
all right. Well, let's assume they have access to everything. Um, there's just I feel there's so many ways to learn vocabulary. I hesitate to tell you how I learn vocabulary because it's just not what teenagers do. I will tell you how I learned it. And so the big issue with vocabulary is you encounter a word, it's in the recesses, the very far back recesses of your mind,
Yes.
the sort of subconscious, but it never becomes active. It stays in the sort of passive confines of your brain. Now, what I have done to activate these words and to use them and have a wide variety at my disposal is that I have the benefit of writing, Volkan, and this is really important.
Uh-huh.
So I encounter a word through reading, I use it in my writing, and then I say it in my lectures. So because in my lectures, I'm always experimenting with new words. Again, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
student. I'm making a presentation, and I want to improve my English. So I'm using new words. And I think the key to vocabulary, if we can simplify what I've just said, is to use it in active forms of communication once you've encountered the word. So you encounter the word,
Yeah.
whether in a movie, listening, or reading. And then the key is first of all, how much time elapses before you use that new word in
Mm-hmm.
an active form of communication, which means either writing or speaking. Those are the two active forms of communication. Now, if you have an intermediate sort of step, you can write the word down and write the definition down. But I think really until you use it in active communication, it's not really going to stay with you long term. That's been my experience.
I see. Thank you very much, Professor Korten. It's really great points about the vocabulary. Thank you very much. So there is one more question, but first I would like to ask my question, and then maybe we can move
Yes.
that question. So uh, my question is about the novice teacher. Like, what advice would you give to a new teacher, like who asks you, what is the best way for me to keep growing as a teacher, professor?
Well, I've alluded to a few ways earlier, and that is
Mm-hmm.
to expose yourself to new experiences. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're just teaching one sort of area, then try to teach a different area. If you're just teaching one level of student, then try to teach a different level. If you're just teaching one age group, switch age groups. So that's the first thing, variety. But here's the second critical step that most teachers, not just
Yeah.
teachers, people in life don't do, either because they're not aware of it or because it's just uncomfortable. And that's assessment. Assessment takes two forms. You can have self-assessment, where you record yourself and then you know, sort of, or you just, you reflect on the experience of the teaching day, and then you say, okay, what went well? What didn't go so well? How can I change it? So this moment to reflect and self-assess is a critical moment to learn. It's your way to educate yourself, but it's
I
something
see.
we're often too busy to do. And then the second way is when you have external assessment, when someone's watching you and able to provide from an outside perspective, you know, constructive criticism. These are very helpful, and I think these are the best ways and the fastest ways you improve in your profession. So varied experiences, and then one of the forms of assessment or both.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much, professors. You know, we are doing the peer observation sometimes here, and it's very useful, as you mentioned it, for our professional development to see the weak sides of teaching to make it better. Thank you very much, professor. So, and the question is this: if you can see it, professor, here is it. How
I
can
can't
we
see any questions. I
Okay.
don't know why.
Okay. Let me read the questions for you. How can, or just a moment. Can you see it now?
Oh, I'm looking now. I just see. Let me just see here. The question is how.
How can we integrate critical thinking skills to our online classes, tasks, and assessing tools in university levels?
In assessing what?
In
I don't
in
see.
in task assessing tools in university levels.
Well, repeat the question one more time, please.
How can we integrate critical thinking skills to our online classes, tasks, and assessing tools in university levels?
Okay, so critical thinking involves asking good questions. It's as basic and simple as that. So it doesn't require a lot of extra things. Obviously you have to be working with some sort of text or subject. You're doing something, but it's the ability, I think, initially from the instructor to ask thought-provoking questions. So you ask a straight. So what I like to do is I like to gradually get more difficult with my questions. I'll ask a straightforward question, and then I'll ask a more thought-provoking question. And so there are different levels of questions. So as an example, you have an event, so I will ask a very basic question on what happened. And then I'll ask perhaps a different question on why do you think it happened? And then we'll start to talk about forms of analysis. How or to what extent do you think? And so we have sort of analysis. It employs degrees of logic, your ability to sort of tie these facts together to conclude this thing. So the sort of basic rudimentary forms of logical thinking are sort of catalyzed by questions, by good questions. Now, students are going to be stumped by some of these. Stumped means they're going to be bewildered. They're not going to know the answer.
Yeah.
And that's where we gently sort of provide some some guidance. But I also tell them, I'm asking, these are different questions. That's a different question than this one. And this is how we develop our thinking, our analysis, our critical thinking. And we do that by asking different questions, good questions, and causing them to think. I absolutely love these exercises. Now, let me say, from the teacher's perspective, this takes practice. So if I'm a teacher, or if I'm, wanting to do this, if you're a teacher and you're wanting to do this, then you take your subject and you have to actually be prepared ahead of time. You have to have these questions, gradually getting more complicated, you have to have them ready and written down. I try to
I
be,
see.
I'm a little bit more spontaneous because I've done this a long time, but still, I mean, I'm prepared. But I think
Mm-hmm.
initially, if you have some of these questions written down, it sort of gently leads the student to deeper and deeper sort of ideas on the topic. And so today, for
Yes,
example, we were talking about, you know, linking, well, as an example, linking ideas,
I see.
actually linking sentences, not linking words, but
Mm-hmm.
linking sentences. And we moved from the topic of what does this paragraph say and what's the main point of this paragraph to a topic that no student, even my best
Mm-hmm.
students, no student had considered. And that's the topic of tone. Tone.
Wow.
And I said, let's talk about tone. And they looked at me like I was speaking a different language. And then they finally understood that they came to the right answer, that
Uh-huh.
one paragraph is very optimistic and the other paragraph is very negative or
Negative,
pessimistic, so positive
pessimistic.
and negative. And so this is a very interesting way to link ideas, not just from the content, but from the tone. And so, you know, these are opening up different ways to analyze, different ways to think. And it's a wonderful thing when you see the lights come on in the students.
I see. Well, wonderful. Thank you very much, Professor Korten. So, my next question, actually, there are questions over there, but I will come
Okay,
that
I'm not
later.
seeing these questions. I don't know why.
But you see, it's here. Like the one question is, at which level should we teach grammar to students?
Wow. Well, I'm not an expert in early child education. So let me just state that right away. So
I
I
see.
don't know what the experts say on that. You're going to have to do, I will defer to their good judgment. But
Mm-hmm.
I think for, you know, adults or I don't know, as early as you can start to understand grammar, I think you need to sort of introduce it to the student. But I think we have to introduce it in a way that correlates with the speaking. So my experience through these language exchanges that I'm hosting on my platform is that students who are speaking a lot find the need for grammar because they know they're making mistakes. If you're not speaking a lot, grammar is a very tedious exercise that mean, unfriendly teachers are foisting upon me to ruin my evenings. And we don't want to do that. So I find that if you're actively speaking, you have the need for grammar because
I see.
you're encountering these problems: subject verb agreements, article use,
I
prepositions.
see.
And so grammar takes on a real necessity. If you're not speaking, and most students, unfortunately, who are learning English aren't speaking enough, which is why my language exchanges, I think, are so very critical. It gets people
Mm-hmm.
speaking.
Exactly.
Then grammar takes on a heightened importance.
I see. Thank you very much, Professor. I think that's the answer of the questions for English coach. And my
Great.
next question is is about the students who speak a very little English, Professor. Like, how can I encourage students who have very little spoken English to develop their communication skills?
Use their hands.
Really? I see.
I mean, my advice is it doesn't matter. Start speaking, get in there. You know, a lot of people ask me, well, can two beginners actually improve? Yes, they can. They absolutely can when the desire is there. Now, can they improve faster with a teacher? Obviously, yes. But a lot of students don't have the financial resources or the luxury of this. So I try to give students the access, you know, the wherewithal, the means to improve with no money, with just a desire. And so if students can't speak English well, this is the reason to start speaking. because you will
Mm-hmm.
start to figure out sentences. You will have to communicate. But if you stay behind this sort of curtain of doubt or I'm not good enough, the you know, you'll never speak.
I see. Mm-hmm. I see. I
So do it.
understand.
Just act, just do it. Action. Start speaking. That's my
Of
advice.
course. I
Even the
see. Thank you very
beginners.
Yeah, it's you know it's really hard to make them speak sometimes if
Yeah, of
they
course.
yeah
Which is
little spoken English.
exactly, which is why my language exchanges, I'm not trying to promote it. I just think it's a great idea. You have two beginners who desperately want to speak. They don't know each other, so they're not embarrassed, or a group
Mm-hmm.
chat. They're able to come together and everyone has the same goal and they're much more open. I'm sitting in on these group chats. I'm going 5 or 6 group chats a week. I'm sitting in on. I know what's happening. And you have
I
people
see.
that are trying to communicate, and this is
I see.
beautiful.
Yeah, you are exactly. I agree with you, Professor. Totally. Okay, so thank you very much. So my next question is this, Professor. How can I be sure my students are actually learning?
Well, I think good methodology or pedagogy suggests that you assess often, regularly.
Mm-hmm.
So you should know how their progress by your regular assessment. There should be no surprises at the end of the semester, at the end of the course in a private language school. There should be no surprises about their score or their
Uh-huh.
performance. They should be regularly assessed
Mm-hmm.
and
I
then
see.
told
So
about their areas of weakness. So regular assessment, I think, covers that.
I see. I got it. So like you know day by day or regularly, as you mentioned,
Well,
we have to
it
assess.
depends. I mean, you can do micro assessments daily, but I mean, serious assessments maybe once a month or every 3 weeks, depending on the intensity of the course.
Mm-hmm.
But what you don't want to have happen, which happens a lot, is that students get to the end and they fail, or they perform very poorly on an exam, and they were not made aware of it earlier. This is the fault of the teacher. It's
I
not the
see.
fault of the teacher about their score. It's the fault of their teacher
Mm-hmm.
for not informing them that they were about to fall off a cliff, linguistically. So
Yeah,
we have to forewarn them to give them time to improve or work
I see.
harder.
Mm-hmm. I got it. Thank you very much, Professor. And my other question is about motivation, Professor. So can you give us some practical tips to increase or to create motivation in different age groups?
Oh, goodness.
This especially it's little it's really hard because of the distance learning. It makes us really
Yeah. I think I've
push
addressed
to
that.
motivate.
Yeah, I think I've addressed that in my earlier answer dealing with how to engage online learners. Your excitement about the subject gives an opportunity for the students to be excited. If you're not excited about the subject, there's no chance they will be. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first step. And then everything else I mentioned earlier about being prepared, being involved, getting involved. You can't obviously do the work for the student. They must take responsibility regardless of how much they're paying you by the hour. They still have to learn. But you can do everything possible, which is showing excitement, being professional, being prepared, being clear. Clarity, I think, is really essential. If students are confused, they lose motivation. So I
Yeah.
was teaching for many years this young girl who started from 0 and went to A2, and I learned so much about early formation. And what I learned was when she got confused, she closed.
I
And
see.
so I
Mm-hmm.
had to be very clear and very sensitive about not making it
Mm-hmm.
too difficult too quickly. And if that means slowing down the progress to give her confidence, then that's what we need to do. But confidence is a lot of it. this, affirming, especially young learners. I think it's very critical.
Yeah, I see. I see. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. So I was looking for the question that they ask, huh, but you have already mentioned the questions answer, like how can we encourage our students to speak in speaking classes? But you have already give some examples for this question, I think.
Yes.
So let me look here. There is another question here. Hmm.
Maybe the last question. We'll take
Yeah,
one
maybe.
more
I'm sure.
question.
Yeah, yeah, sure. This is the last question that we
Mhm.
can take from them. How to stay concentrated on your subject?
Well, it depends on the situation. If you're a student, you stay concentrated because there's a fear of failing at the end of the semester.
Yeah,
So that's an imposed concentration. You have to focus
yeah.
at some point before the final exam or you fail. When you get
Mm-hmm.
older, or if you're doing language voluntarily, then motivation comes, I think, from how close and how relevant it is to necessity. How much do you need it? How important it is in your life?
I
I
see.
don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that's their understanding of concentration, or if they mean sitting 3 hours in
Mm-hmm.
front of a book. That's a different sort of concentration.
Mm-hmm.
That involves other skills. So if you're talking about just sort of focusing for 45 minutes, that's a different sort of concentration.
I see. I see, Professor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Korten. And Professor Korten, I think actually we could do these sessions for hours and hours, but uh, I'm really sorry from the audiences, but Professor Korten is very busy, so I think that was the last question that we have received. And my last question is this: what would you like to tell to our audiences and as your last words before we finish our live sessions, Professor?
Okay, that's a great way to end. I would like to posit the notion that learning is a beautiful experience that should be a lifelong endeavor. It's not a final product. It's something that sort of stays with you. It keeps you young. It keeps you excited. It keeps you involved. I think it keeps you sane in some
Uh-huh.
cases. But to enjoy the process of learning, I think some of us we get so fixed on goals and international
Uh-huh.
exams and grammar tests that we lose sight of the enjoyment of learning. And that involves taking a step back and saying, wow, I'm learning this. This is really nice. So make a concerted effort. I do, and I'm challenging you to make a concerted effort to enjoy the process of learning. It's a wonderful thing, or you wouldn't be in doing it, but sometimes we get busy and then we forget. So enjoy the process. It's a lifelong endeavor. There's no finish point, so there's no point, we don't need to compare ourselves because it's a lifelong journey.
I
And
see.
keep working.
Thank you very much. I see. Thank you very much, Professor. So